Hi, thanks for coming.
Oh, yes.
Gordon and I have been discussing this thing for a year, 6 months, you know. So we've distilled it into some flashcards for a game where my hands are going to shake, where you guys will choose a card and then we'll talk about it. And then
Should turn them upside down.
And there's an open mic opportunity too. I was born in South Africa, and I went to England, and a Canadian man from Toronto, I wish I could contact him, said, "You've got to come and see shows." And I went to see shows and enjoyed that, and came back to South Africa. And, while I was there, I also studied drawing at the St. Martin's School of Art. It was at night. And that was just life drawing. And then when I went back to South Africa, I went to a lecture series which was on an architect called Neville Dubois. He spoke about the German Expressionists and the Blue Rider. So that, I thought, hey, that's about art. I'm living in this country which is under the suppressive regime, etc. And so that's where art can come in. I hadn't seen anything like that. So when I came to Canada in 1966, got very sick, I went to the University of Saskatchewan, did a BFA, and it was formal. It was formal, and it knows it was formal.
I know it.
And so then I had to lose anything that had to do with narrative or content. I had to squash that. So that style went out. So then I took up tapestry, and I went to Edinburgh School of Art, where I thought I could do formal things better than the painters. So I did that. But they didn't realize it was better than painting. And
Until you did it.
and so I don't think I have a style, except to some extent I have gone back to the fact that I think words and text and the German Expressionists have come together. But somebody said I reminded them of Roald Dahl. And I do know his work, but I wasn't aware that that was a part of my style. So,
Isn't Dollar, right?
Yeah.
writer and black, dark humor and kids' illustrations. I like that thing about interfering with the mind, because for me, with these works and any works, I need to be very quiet. I need to go where I didn't know where I was going, and so it means starting with some marks that are not totally random, and then seeing what comes up. So that's my improvisation.
I wanted to ask you about improvisation in terms of your text as well.
That's a question that comes up quite a lot. Thanks, Gordon. Do I have the text first, or do I do the drawing first? And they happen sometimes simultaneously. The text is never first, and it's not an illustration, so that it's my words. I don't find some words that have come from Gordon and then I go and do a drawing for it, but it's my words, and they come in bits, and sometimes they come in weeks. So it requires a sort of meditative state. Oh God, I thought, yeah.
Okay, just that last part.
Yeah, I got very angry because the sketchbook was made with such poor paper that everything showed through. And that annoyed me so much because I used wet media. And so I found that I really rather liked the marks coming back. And it was about memory, so that's how memory comes back and sticks.
You could see the play, and you did it. Going through the thing, it was quite marvelous. The sense of the immediacy of your play with that book.
Thank
I was
you.
delighted. It was
Thank
great.
you. I nearly didn't send it off, also.
You had a sense of that.
The whole book was called Help, wasn't it?
They had a series where that you chose whether you wanted to do any category. So I chose the category Help because I thought it had the greatest. There were things like It's Raining Cats and Dogs, It's a Happy Day, So I chose Help. somebody came in and they said, "What did your mother say to you about halos?" And I said, "Well, she talked in general about virtue and so on." And apparently this person's mother actually said, "Don't you go polishing your halo too much." Did anybody's mother say that to them?
I've heard it.
You've heard it.
Yeah.
So I like the generalizations of things.
Text work. You should start because you're the text person.
I did talk about where words come from. Gordon got into trouble with me the other day. He said, "You're a writer." And I said, "Can't you be both?" But words and text in the artwork, where the text is being marks because of my formal training, I see, if I write a word like halo, I see it visually, and I don't. It's another thing I try to keep down because I fought it for a long time. But my work in tapestry, many of the tapestries had words. They had things like, the king is great, or the pope is coming, or they wove it into because it was like TV in those days. So that reinforced my interest in having actual text in the work as part of the visual imagery.
But you've also developed your own font,
Yes.
and that way the text plays a very strong part in your work.
That little jar of tapestries that I made in medieval style, quite fine, I scanned and I made a personal font, thanks Mary, and I have used them in artworks so that they go back to manuscripts, and the way that capitals are decorative capitals, and I've used them as capitals. So that's even taking it into more concrete form.
And you've used Pitman's shorthand in your work too.
And I was trained in Pitman's shorthand because girls had to just get a job before they got married. And so I went back on a trip to South Africa, and I was very conscious that the security police, who had visited us in the middle of the night and that stuff, who might be checking on us. They'd lost interest in John and I think, by that time. But I kept a diary in shorthand so that I could keep it personal. And that started the visual part. The marks, the phonetic marks. I do read theory, and I know the names of the authors, and I get 10 pages in and I think, yeah, I know that. And then I like to put it away because I don't want to be too influenced by what is in the theory. And so I'm very eclectic from that point of view. And as far as art history is concerned, I think that's another very slippery topic. Whose art history, which art history? I got roped in to teach Art History 101 at the University of Saskatchewan when various other people were doing other things, better qualified, like really qualified people. But it was very interesting to have that set of slides, Jansen's set of slides, which you could depart from or whatever, and I inserted things like the Apocalypse tapestry into it, not just so that, and then in 1266 or whatever it was, they did a big tapestry. Well, they did a whole room of tapestry. So I did do a sort of subversive version. So I can't say what art history has influenced me or where I draw on it, nor can I say what theory. I'd like to also say that I absolutely agree with you, Annette, and I realize I gave the impression that I thought theory was not important. I think it's very important, and I have read it followed it largely, people like Homi K. Barber and things like that, especially on post-colonial stuff. But then I find it comes between me and my studio work.
Which is what Gordon tells us.
Yes. So I find that many people talking about their work are not very interesting if they don't contextualize where it's out in the air where it comes in and how you've brought it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about text. I think that theory is a text, and that you use the theories that you want to communicate that text with other people who are interested in that text too. At a sort of gut level, I believe that life is absurd and things are very bizarre, but they're very tragic, as we know, but it's also there's humour, and so that the old mask of the tragic comedy in theatre is I think something that's enduring, even though it's so trite. And I like to work with trite things because some of them have depth. So it's just a sort of gut level thing, not a theory, not a thought out academic position. Gordon said earlier on that his work is very subjective, as were your words, and that's been one of the things that where we have been talking about our respective work before now. I think mine's very subjective, but I am concerned with the human condition. And
Yes,
so
because your work is narrative. It's definitely narrative, because you are a writer as well as a visual artist.
I've trained him. Yeah, well, the subjective element, and I
Right.
think that what one might feel is something I wouldn't want to reveal. Hey, that rhymes.
Uh-huh.
And what kind of performance one is doing, as Gordon said. Not long ago, Gordon found a book that he liked a lot, and he got a copy for me, and it was called, I'm going to have trouble pronouncing it, Raw Art? Raw Art?
Right, yeah.
And so, back of what he's doing, I think, and certainly what I'm doing, is a huge respect for people who are untrained, who haven't gone
Or
to art school,
schizophrenics.
or haven't been, given.
So schizophrenic are,
Outside of art.
yeah.
Or, yeah, as if is a huge respect for people who are theoretically untrained and also not been taken up in terms of art mark hierarchies, that sort
Right.
of thing. Well, I think that's a very slippery word, but if I take it as you mean it, does it affect me? Yes, and I'm very focused. And when it stops being illuminating, it's time to move on. So that it's sort of an initial thing which fires you up in many ways. I think it's more I'd like to communicate. I found, for instance, Daniel Siegel came in and he really related to a piece that I thought was very feminist and very personal. And he really took it up, and I like that, so that you reveal enough to communicate, but not to lay it all on the table. Well, I think that has something to do with coming back to the question of the interaction with the viewer and the artist, so
Right.
that look at a de Kooning, I look at it one way and Gordon looks at it another way. Someone from Holland might look at it in a different way. So that I think is an element in that reception.
Right, I think so. Right.
Which is a guy came to the opening, and when he left, he said, "You are a bad girl." And I said, "What do you mean?" So he said, "Well, it's pornographic." And how is it pornographic? So he said, "There's eggs and sperms all over the place." I didn't do one egg, I didn't do one sperm.
It was Gordon's word.
He was
about Gordon.
They're not breasts or eyes, they're eggs.
Things it's been.
Well, that's really interesting. Thank you very much for
Well,
this. Wow. Wow.
Very nice. Very good.
Thank you for